What's up, everybody? It's Carpo here, and this video will be entitled something along the lines of God, I don't even know how I'm going to title it. There's a lot of good stuff out there. How about that? There's a lot of good stuff out there. What I'm specifically talking about in this video are items that our ancestors, or people who lived before the Industrial Revolution, found extremely useful, yet in very short supply. Now, I have a couple of examples here because I just ordered this beeswax, okay, the other day, and I just got it in the mail. Now, 5 pounds of beeswax. It was 40 bucks, or 35 bucks, I guess. My plan is to make candles out of it. Now, beeswax is readily available. I mean, these days we have bee farmers, and there is plenty of wax to go around, and not as many people using it because of the fact of paraffin and other waxes that are used. Therefore, it becomes affordable because not everybody's using it. Now, the exact same thing happens with this, essential oils. This one is citronella, and I just love the smell. I use tea tree oil and peppermint oil, eucalyptus, ylang ylang. A whole bunch of different smells, and they all, basically what you smell in these are terpenes, okay? I'm going to try not to get too far off track. I just want to go through a couple items so I can give you the example. Even right over here, I've got some of these right here. Ceylon cinnamon. Whew, smells so good. Black pepper. At one time traded for more than gold, okay? So, I realized that we're living in a time where things are just so cheap that once were very expensive. It's changed the way that we do business because of the fact that now we can farm many of these herbs that once were a little bit rarer. Now we can have beehives, and now we don't have to sit around with a boiling pot over a fire distilling herbs and plants just to get a small bit of oil, because that's how oil is got. Essential oils from plants. For those who don't know, it's you take all the plants in a big vat with water and you boil them and evaporate off and distill just like you do with liquor. And that distilled oil is separated from the water, and there you have the essential oil of the plant. Now, most folks are aware of the benefits of essential oils. They do all kinds of great things, and they're not just like some new age type thing. I mean, they've been known to be healing agents for a long time. I use tea tree oil on skin abrasions and such, and it's amazing the difference it makes. So, without getting into the medical aspects of it, they're also used for flavoring. They're used for, during World War II, I guess, the Australian soldiers in their military were required to carry tea tree oil in their emergency kit, because it's always been a well-known, antiseptic. Now, plants produce a lot of these compounds in order to protect themselves from insects and animals, predators. So many of these things are also insect repellents as well, just like tea tree oil, citronella, like citronella candles. I don't want to go off too much on essential oils, but it blows my mind that you can go out and buy a bottle of this for 10 bucks. Although, it's because it's not extremely in demand, and because it's really easy to make now with the industrial machinery and the giant boiling kettles that we have. These are things that I don't overlook. These are things that I find really important to remember. So, what I'm trying to say here is that, when I remember back in the 90s when fleece was really popular, okay? The recycled pop bottle type fleece jackets and coats. I mean, fleece wasn't really a thing until the 90s, and it was huge then. Everybody was wearing fleece. And naturally, everybody wanted to have them because they looked warm and poofy. And they came out with hollow fill and all these different types of stuffing for sleeping bags, for jackets and clothing and whatnot. And Gore-Tex, things like that. But we still go back and find out that leather is still a superior product over a lot of them for breathability. And then we have, I don't know how I lost that one. For the hollow fill stuff, goose down was my point. Anybody who's used a goose down or a down jacket or a down blanket comforter knows that they are so warm, and they're just amazing. I mean, none of the modern products I've had have the same effect as feathers. I know that sounds silly, but mankind has been trying to duplicate nature for a long time. So all these products that we've come out with now mean that there's less demand on the older ones, things like down and whatnot. And there's also giant, duck and goose farms where they harvest the down. So it's not always a good thing that there's a surplus. But what I'm saying is you as an individual can really take advantage of things that once were very expensive to have, but now are everywhere. Clothing used to be such a commodity for people. I mean, if you had silk, that was amazing. Silk is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Silk used to be so expensive. I mean, they have to unwind the silk from a silkworm's butt. I mean, think about this. This is a lot of work to provide a little bit of material. And so only kings and queens had the ability to have silk. And silk sheets were just unheard of. I mean, hundreds of years ago, it was like if you had silk sheets, you were damn rich. Nowadays, you can buy them anywhere. Because the silkworms are grown in factories and dissolved in giant vats, and they're done for cheaper labor. The more people that are involved in a process, and the more machinery that's been built towards that process, the more affordable it becomes. So I'm looking at a negative aspect of our modern world, which is over-industrialization, and trying to pull a positive aspect out of it, which is that we as individuals at least should be able to benefit from some of these things. I'm going to make these beeswax candles. I've also taken beeswax and made it into a lip balm. I was actually giving some away last year. I still have a bunch of it, but take a little bit of that with some olive oil and a little bit of peppermint oil. And it's just amazing to me that all of the spices, all of the different flavors that are available to us, that, our ancestors had to really they could only dream about, had no idea. On one hand, it makes us very lucky. On another hand, it makes them very lucky. Because when they did finally taste pepper, or they did finally get a silk shirt, it meant so much more to them than it does to us. We have lost touch with our roots. We've lost touch with the things that matter to us. And tried to fill that with things like iPhones and fancy clothes and cars. Really, the basic beauties of life are something as simple as just smelling citronella oil. And it's sitting here in a glass bottle, which hundreds of years ago you would have to have somebody hand blow that glass bottle. Then they would have to find some sort of a cork for it. Waterproofing was a serious issue back in the day, and our harnessing of fossil fuels has allowed us to create a lot more waterproof fabrics, tents, house materials. It's amazing. I mean, you really have to look at it with an open mind. If you don't try to label where we're at as a species and realize that humans got here because we wanted to be here, that there's no giant underlying plan that's been followed. Rather, we've created this as we go along. A guy's sitting there and he thinks, I really wish that I didn't have to pay so much for beeswax to make candles. It's ridiculous. And another guy's thinking, hey, honey is just way too expensive. Naturally, the progression is going to be to farm bees, And the same way with the fruits and the vegetables that we've grown, that we've not genetically modified, but genetically selected for the best traits and qualities that have brought us to where we can eat a giant apple or an orange. They weren't always like that, And what I do observe is that people are beating themselves up over it now. And I'm one of them. We all do. We're ashamed of what's happened. That we're not just ashamed of ourselves as individuals, but we're ashamed of what humans in general have done to the environment, to the world. And at the same time, we have to realize that while it's shameful, it's only natural that we have to experience something negative in order to grow back out of it into something better. So, if tomorrow there were to be a major solar flare, or CME, if it was large enough, it could take out the world's power grid. There could be ground currents that would fry every transformer at least on the dark side of the planet, because that's the way it works. I used to be kind of obsessed about these things. Now I don't think much about it. But if you're familiar with the Carrington event of 1865, or I think it was 1865 or 9, it was a telegraph station. You know, some of them caught on fire and telegraph lines burned down, and that was all there was. There was no power yet back then. So today, if that happened, what happened in 1859, which is a regular occurrence every century or two, then, and we're overdue for one, then it would take out the grid. If the grid was down, nobody could communicate, and trucks would stop shipping, and everything would fall into disarray. The reason I'm saying this is because it could happen tomorrow, and if it did, there would be some very basic things that you would wish you had got back when they were readily available. So if the shit does start to hit the fan, sure, you want to be prepared. You want to have food, you want to have water and shelter and plans of where to go. But it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of beeswax around to make some candles or to use for your lips. There are several uses for that. Essential oil, stock up on it. It can help you with cuts, with disinfecting, with abrasions, or even with flavoring. Something like pepper, spices, why not? It doesn't cost that much to get a little bit of extra to stock up on. So that's really why I'm making this video, is to let people know that there are some things out there that last a long time, some of them indefinitely, which you can purchase readily right now, cheap, that may not always be cheap. And that's something that each individual will have to decide if it's something that they want to look into. But I have always been a prepper type mentality. Yet I've set that aside over the last 5 years because I'm raising my kids, I have a family and a life, and I'm not going to look at the future as this bleak disaster. But it doesn't mean that you can ignore it, because anything can happen. So, having these items readily available, things like oils will last almost indefinitely as far as I know. They don't go bad. They're essential oils. And the same with the beeswax. This will probably be in the same state it is in 20 years, because nature knows what it's doing. You know, nature's creations don't always fall apart as easy as we do. Ours do, man-made, and sometimes they're much more effective. So, you know, we're going back to that mentality, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Anyhow, video's getting long, so I'm going to wish you all well and hope you all have a wonderful day. There's probably a huge list of things that I could think of like this, but it was just the beeswax that inspired me to make the video. And beeswax candles, by the way, are phenomenal. I mean, paraffin is completely inferior. Plus, it puts off worse fumes. As far as I know, they burn much faster too. You know, many of the candles on the market today are just crap. But a good beeswax candle with a couple drops of, you know, essential oil in it, I mean, or even add some spices or cinnamon to it while you're making it, they're awesome. So I'm going to go make some right now. Talk to you all.